So what we're seeing more and more is that organizations are in need to really adapt to fast changing events. So those are climate events, those are the need to ensure assets and infrastructure to make sure they're resilient, they can weather these changes, and that organization can actually understand what is going on. So a key motivation is to have a more complete picture of what is happening around organization assets. And I use the term assets in the widest possible sense, right? Assets ranging from agricultural assets such as crops to urban infrastructure, to energy and utility infrastructure like the transmission lines and so on. So the goal is to understand and adapt to the impact of fast changing events and to get a better view of the likelihood of those events happening in the future, to mitigate losses, to increase resilience, to be able to adapt. And this is really what it's all about, adapt to a fast-changing environment and get a complete picture. Mm-hmm. So when we look at key applications, for instance, right? Anomalies, diseases, for instance, in an agricultural asset context, being able to assess, understand crop diseases for rare crops, or for crops that are for crops that are critical for things like importing, the nature finance sector in that sense, and to monitor agricultural practices. There you need specific data sets for regions. You need data to be able to train a model to recognize and understand diseases, for instance. And this relates and simulating scenarios. That's a really, really, really important one as well. So this relates, of course, to the finance sector, insurance sector, and the wider food supply chain. Another thing is the understanding and assessment of risks as they relate to natural disasters, to be able to understand the impact of wildfires or landslides. So essentially, how could the effect of natural disasters, how do they impact claims and how do they impact losses? So obviously insurance industry and reinsurance industry is that's a big factor here. And simulate scenarios, how could they impact claims in the future? How do they impact underwriting models in the future? So there it's really about characterizing and understanding what has happened and what is likely to happen next. There again, you need up-to-date data, right, of the events and simulations of what further events could look like, because very often you don't have historical data for events like that. So that's a really, really important use case and application in AI and naturetech. And finally, really looking back at like kind of anomalies or like monitoring. It's monitoring critical infrastructure such as transmission lines or power plants. So that, of course, as it relates, is serving the population with energy, but then also understanding the impact on vegetation around, or the impact for vegetation around those. There again, it's about monitoring, tracking, but again, predicting the likelihood of something happening. So as you can see, it's always about understanding the big picture, building data to train models to see what has happened, what is the status quo, and then predict the likelihood of certain scenarios happening. And the scenario building is a really interesting one because sometimes we don't really know what scenarios, there's new scenarios coming up all the time, and that's part of this fast-changing environment.